Hello everyone, and welcome to another video. This week we will be talking about my recent reads of January. I have officially, as of January 27th, read 6 books this month. I am way ahead of my goal for the year, and we can only go downhill from here. So let's get started. What have I been reading this month? So we're going to do this in no particular order. I'm kind of going off at the top of my head of what I've read, and then we're going to double check my Goodreads for the specifics of it. So first and foremost, a book I finished today, a book I never really thought I was going to read, and now a series that I will be reading. Ice Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon. I know. Ice Planet Barbarians is something else. If you've been living under a rock, Ice Planet Barbarians is an alien smut romance that is out there. It has been around for a few years now. I first came to notice it in 2022, I believe, and I knew it was like one of those crazy romances that you have to not take seriously, you know? And I always kind of put it on the back burner of maybe one day I'll read it. And then my friend Blake talked about it. He has been reading it, and he highly recommended the whole series because he thought the whole series was really well done. Is it mostly smut? Yes. But the world itself is also really interesting along with all the characters. You kind of have to get past the first book and exploring all of that. Also, we have been living in unprecedented times, and I did not want to consume anything else at this point because being on social media, seeing the news every day, sucks. It sucks, and I need just something simple and fun that I can distract myself with for a couple hours at a time. So that's why I finally picked up Ice Planet Barbarians. So what is this series about if you don't even know? Ice Planet Barbarians follows a group of women who are kidnapped by aliens, abducted by aliens, and they are essentially going to be cargo and sold off to a different alien species, alien life forms. We're not entirely sure, at least from the first book. I don't know if we ever find out in the future what happens or what the original plan with them is. I do want to give some trigger warnings because there were not any when I first read the book. There are trigger warnings for abduction, abuse, sexual assault, a pretty, I would argue, a graphic scene of sexual assault right in the beginning of the book. Arguably consensual sex. It's kind of up in the air what happens. And those are the trigger warnings that I am aware of when it comes to at least the first book. I know that other books do deal with the aftermath of a lot of this abuse that happens in this first book. So we have this group of women who are abducted by these aliens, and something happens with the alien ship, and they are dumped on this ice planet, and they kill one of their captors. And one of the women, Georgie, goes out onto the planet to try to get them help. And she comes across an Ice Planet barbarian named Vector, and immediately there is, I guess, a fated mate kind of a thing. It's a very love at first sight thing with them. And that's the main relationship that you follow as these women are adjusting to the planet. You don't get much of the adjustment. We kind of save them at the end of the book. We have the main character of Georgie figuring out, okay, we're on this planet. We can't really survive on this planet unless we get this weird worm thing in our neck. And also there's this alien race that is kind of going extinct, and they kind of need us because we're all women to help them and their species go on. But also it's like a weird fated mate thing. So they're not going to force you to do anything. It's a whole thing. But I really enjoyed the first book. And I despite all the trigger warnings that did happen in the beginning of the book, and despite the first meeting of our two main love interests, being interesting, to say the least, I did enjoy the book, and I'm interested to see where we are going with the next couple ones. I think there's like 12 of these books at this point. I'm going crazy. I have to wait 4 weeks for the next audiobook because of my library. The next one I read recently is actually an arc that just came out today on the 27th. It is Sundown Girls by L.S. Stratton. This book follows Naomi. She also goes by Cameron, and Naomi/Cameron was kidnapped when she was a baby, and when she was 15, she was eventually found and given back to her birth family, but she never knew this until the day she turned 15. And so it's been a struggle for her to adjust and connect back with this family. So they decide to go on this summer vacation in Virginia, and they go to this town called Sparksburg, I think it's called, to just kind of get to know each other and try to fix things that are happening. What they don't know and what they do learn is that Sparksburg has a racist history to it. They were a sundown town. Now, if you don't know what a sundown town is, it was a time, I believe, after the Civil War, potentially after World War One. I could be wrong on that. It might, but I know it was around that time. A lot of racial things were happening where a lot of different things at the time, but one of the main things was a lot of these towns that were mostly white wanted to kick out all of these black people and these African American families because they think they didn't belong there. And so they would set up these laws and these rules saying, if you are a person of color and you are in this town after sundown, we have a right to chase you out and potentially harm you and take your life at the end of it. And unfortunately, many people lost their lives because of it. Hold on. Oh my God. Sorry about that. I had to chase my cat around the house. Where were we? So, Sparksburg has a racist history. They were a sundown town. But this is talked about in the beginning, but it's not like a main focus until the mystery shows up and we realize that two girls who have been in Sparksburg have gone missing. And so Naomi/Cameron is trying to figure out this mystery of these missing girls because she herself was a missing girl at one point. There's also some ghosts, spooky spirit stuff happening at the same time. So that was really cool. I think this book does really well talking about the racist history of this town and in America itself, and dealing with that as a young person and trying to make those connections and learn what they can do to fix it. I think also the relationship of Naomi with her family, with her birth family, was really interesting, and you can really feel the tension happening between all of them because no one really knows what to do in that situation. Now, I personally would have liked more about her time with the woman who had kidnapped her as a child. We get little snippets here and there, but we never get like we never see the dark side of it, which is kind of hinted at throughout the story, but Naomi never ever talks about it. And that could just be because she hasn't processed it yet. She doesn't want to talk about it, and we are through her point of view. So if it's not something that she wants to recall and she wants to talk about, or maybe she doesn't even realize was abuse at that point, wasn't ever really discussed. I also, and this is my last critique of the book, I do think it's a good book. I thought the villain was a little weird. I'm not going to give too many spoilers about who the villain is, but I wish there was, the whole point of a mystery is you're supposed to make these puzzle pieces fit together so you can find out who it is. And it just kind of felt like a boom, there it is. You know, like we never really saw interactions and that kind of stuff. But again, that's just me. This is a young adult book, and I find that I am a little more critical of young adult books as I get older because I'm not the audience for it. So I do think this is a good book for young adult audiences. So a fun fact about this next book is that I did a podcast about it with my friend Blake, and I will link that in the links below. I'll try to put it on this side of the screen here. But the book I read for this podcast, it was a nonfiction book. It talked about the history and the hanging of Susanna Cox. Now, if you are someone who is local to Pennsylvania, you might know this story a little bit. This story is about Susanna Cox, and she was the last woman who was publicly executed in Pennsylvania. Again, trigger warning for this story. There is talk of infanticide, of murder, of execution, of hanging, and all of this kind of stuff. It's a very interesting story about the early judicial system of America and the way they treated women based on their class, based on their own beliefs, and all of this kind of stuff. And it was just so sad reading her story, knowing that if it had happened today, things could have been different, but the cards were stacked against her at this time. And it's also an interesting read because each chapter kind of explains a different thing that eventually led to her execution, whether it be why her lawyers did what they did. Again, the judicial system of early America at this time, the aftermath. There was a ballad written about Susanna Cox, and that's why her history is still there, because I say ballad as if it's a song. It was more of a broadside, which were these printed papers that were like poems, ballads, and all that kind of stuff that told morals of stories. And that is why her story got so popular, because it was spread out through that. And now again, in my opinion, the broadside kind of made Susanna out to be this horrible murderess, where when you read her history, we don't know what happened. In my opinion, I think she's innocent. I don't think she did what they accused her of, but this crime took place in 1809, and we will never truly know what happened at that time. But it's an interesting look at American history, especially with a lot of things that happen nowadays. And it's sad. It's a sad chapter in our lives, but it was something I was interested in. So The Hanging of Susanna Cox was another book I read. Next, we're going to talk about The First Part Last by Angela Johnson. I had initially picked up this book because I was trying to reach my reading goal for the year, and this is a short story, so I thought that would help me reach my reading goal. But I ended up reading it this year, so that's totally fine. The First Part Last follows Bobby, who is a teenager living in the city. He's trying to get through high school. He's trying to figure out what he's going to do for the rest of his life. And on top of all of that, he is a father. He is a teenage father. And the mother is not in the picture. We don't really find out what happened to the mother until later on in the book. But I really liked this story because it told the story of a teen pregnancy and the decisions that go on with all of that through the perspective of the father of the child. And we don't see that very often. A lot of the times, if we're going at it through the woman's point of view or the girl's point of view at that time, a lot of the times the father of the child is pretty much absent because historically, and most of the time, they kind of just go away. They find out they got somebody pregnant and they wipe their hands of the situation and say, it's not my fault. And unfortunately, that's just what happens a lot of the time. And even if a father were to stay in the picture, your young teenagers trying to take care of this baby, it's going to be a hard struggle, and there's not many success stories out there. So it was really cool to see this perspective of this young teenage man taking care of this baby, doing what he can for this baby, and constantly talking about the love that he has for this child and how he's trying to do so much for this child. And so many people in his life before and after the child are born telling him, you know, you should go do this and do this, that way, and you should go over here and do that, or you should just not deal with it at all and just leave it to the woman's point of view, or to make it the woman's problem. And I really thought that the fact that we have that is, I think, good. I think it's good for young men to see that and to see that there is a different path that they can take when it comes to being teenage fathers. Now, I'm a woman. I believe in the right to choose, and I believe that the woman should ultimately make that choice. Now, should the father's opinion be kind of taken in? Yes, but at the end of the day, it's her body, and she's going to make that choice with it. But again, I think this is a good story for young men to read because I think this shows them a good example of what can happen. And granted, I was kind of confused at the way this book ended. It kind of seemed like they got a happy ending, but it just kind of felt a little fast for me. It was a short story though, so maybe that's why. It's told in dual perspectives, so we are there after the birth and before the birth. So you get to see a little bit of how we got here and then how we're dealing with the recompenses of everything. And again, that is The First Part Last by Angela Johnson. Next, we have, surprisingly, the one and only graphic novel I have read so far this year, and that is Angelica and the Bear Prince by Trung Le Nguyen. This story follows Angelica, who, after having a bit of a mental breakdown because she had way too much on her plate, she has gotten an exclusive internship at this theater that she's always loved growing up, and she's going to be a part of the production as the backstage, and she's going to be helping telling the story of The Bear Prince, which is a fun fairy tale, very reminiscent of Cupid and Psyche, if you know that. Some people would try to say Hades and Persephone is much more Cupid and Psyche, in my opinion, than anything. But yes, it's a fun story of, well, I say fun. It deals with some heavy topics, such as transgender characters, parents struggling with money, your own mental health, and all of that, and everything that kind of entails with it, and just relationships in general when you're a teenager, not just the romantic relationships you have in your life, but the platonic ones, the friendships you have, and learning to deal with that. Because if we're going to be honest, a lot of teenagers are selfish. Coming from a former teenager who was pretty selfish at that time, you're really caught up in your own thoughts and your own feelings that you kind of forget to take in the perspective of the other people in the world around you. So I think Angelica and the Bear Prince really kind of entangles that all together. It's a fun, I believe it's a not young adult, it might be middle grade, might be a nice middle grade graphic novel read for them. What I love what Trung does is you have the chapters, but then you also have the fairy tale aspect incorporated in it, and it helps you go along and tell the story. They also did The Magic Fish, which is more of a story about immigration and understanding your culture and trying not to lose that as you move on to a new country and you're trying to fit in there. And that one did, again, much more integration with different fairy tales. I believe The Little Mermaid might have been one of them that was in there, but I believe it was also Vietnamese specific fairy tales that were integrated in there as well. So that was really fun. I really love Trung Le Nguyen's just design and art style that he comes up with, and I'm so excited to see what he does in the future. Hello, future Ashley here. That video was supposed to come out a week ago. It is currently February 1st. I'm filming a different video, hence the look. But I finished one more book in January that I wanted to talk about, and that book is Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. Now, I know, I know Ali Hazelwood tends to kind of write the same romance over and over again. Tall, buff, grumpy guy meets kind of sunshiny, bubbly girl. I would argue that Scarlet in this book isn't the sunshiny one, but that's okay. If you don't know what Deep End is about, it kind of still follows the Ali Hazelwood universe of like the scientists and stuff, but this one follows student athletes at Stanford. And we have Scarlet and Lucas, who are on arguably the same, not the same team, but they're in like the same department. She's a diver for Stanford and he is a swimmer for Stanford, and he has already been to the Olympics and he's going to go again. So Scarlet had an injury her freshman year, at the end of her freshman year. She was out for the season sophomore year, and now she's back. However, she's not as good as she was beforehand, and she's kind of dealing with that. She's also into some interesting things when it comes to the bedroom. I will put disclaimer there because I don't think I can say these things on YouTube. And she kind of comes up with this deal, compromise with Lucas to try to be that thing for each other while they're focusing on other things. Now, that's kind of how it's been pushed to me, is it's this big kinky romance out there. And I was like, not really into it, whatever. But I've been in a book slump for a while now, and I've realized I just want to read romance books, and that's okay. And Deep End by Ali Hazelwood was there, and I was like, you know what? I should give this book a try. I've liked her other books. I think I'm going to like this one. Oh my God, you guys. I love this book. I listened to the audiobook. I don't know who did the audio for Lucas. They were very good. But the audio for Scarlet, her name is Therese Pumler. Therese, can I call you Therese? You did so good. You did so good. I feel like no one ever gives the woman in audiobooks credit, especially the romance ones, especially when they have to voice certain scenes. Therese, you did so good. I applaud you. I give you credit where credit is due, obviously. Yeah, surprising read of January. I'm looking into reading more. Fun fact, I wasn't gonna read the, Problematic Summer Romance by Ali Hazelwood, because I thought it was a girl and like her dad's best friend age gap romance, which is not my thing. I'm not a big age gap romance person in general, but this one is actually older brother's best friend with the sister. So I'm gonna give it a chance. Again, I'm not a big age gap romance, so I'm interested to see how this dynamic goes. It's not a huge age gap if you consider 15 years to not be a huge age gap. He's 38, she's 23, so do what you will with that. I will report on that later. And the final story that I read, technically listened to via audiobook, but I also own the physical copy of it, is something that's really fun, something that I have. If you're a BuzzFeed Unsolved fan, you might also like this. It is the BuzzFeed The Unsolved Supernatural 101 True Tales of Hauntings, Demons, and the Paranormal. Now, like I said, I listened to the audiobook of this, and I thought that was really a great way to absorb the story. I do want to physically read it because there's more like pictures and little tidbits and stuff like that. But listening to it was cool because Shane and Ryan were there along with the narrator, and they would constantly just be interrupting the narrator with their own little tidbits and their own little facts about things, especially if they had already had a ghost hunt there or they already knew about the history there. And while I'm sure it is also pretty the same in again what was written in here, it did feel very natural in my sense. It felt like there's like the go back and forth that they have in all of their videos. So that was another thing that I read this year. Well, no, I read it. It was an audiobook. I mean, Ice Planet Barbarians was also an audiobook, and audiobooks are reading, and I will die on that hill. So that was the other book that I read this year. Did I have a favorite tale? Let me flip through. Probably The Terrors of the Yuma Territorial Prison, mostly because, and I think they did an Unsolved episode about that. That was the episode where there was a shit ton of bats. And the bats were constantly going after the boys. And it's just a silly, fun time. And I love this. And I hope they make another book where they have their commentary in it. Obviously, it won't be with BuzzFeed anymore. But I'd be interested to see if they do another, like maybe a history one. They've done true crime before. Maybe a mystery file story, if anything. So those are my recent reads so far of January. We'll see if I finish another one. If not, I will put it in the next video. I'll try to do these monthly updates of the books I read just to talk about them and kind of keep myself accountable for when it comes to reading. What am I trying to read right now? I'm trying to finish the first Percy Jackson book. I have started it. I do want to try to finish it. I want to reread that whole series at least this year. If you watched my vlog that I posted, I tried to read the whole series in a weekend and I completely failed because I knew I was going to fail. I knew I wasn't going to do it, but you know, you live and you learn. I have a couple arcs that are coming up that I need to read, make reviews about. Go follow my TikTok to see those reviews for those books. Sundown Girls is going to be one of them, so I highly recommend going on there. And yeah, that's kind of the plan for February right now. That's kind of all we got. Thank you guys for joining me. I just wanted to put a super quick video out there because I'm trying to be consistent with this channel. I hope you liked some of those books. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. What are your recent reads that you have read this year or you are planning to read, at least for the month of January? Bye guys.